One of the other exercises in the third set of array exercises was to have a key and then to have student answers, compare the two and see how many the student got right, give them 4 points for each correct answer, take away a point for each incorrect answer, and so on. So to set this one up here in main, again, I don't think you can take a shortcut and try to pass the array by putting the actual array values as parameters to your method call. And I think the compiler would tend to think maybe that you had a method that was expecting 8 string parameters if you did that. So instead, take the shortcut method to declare and initialize the two arrays, and then we're going to pass them to a method. Notice again here I'm going to use a static method that's also going to be declared in the same file. So in this case I'm only going to have one file. I'm not going to go through the whole create an object, create a second Java class file. So I've got the method also here in this same file, and I'm going to pass it the two arrays, key and answer. And then up here above my main, right after my public class line, but above the main, I'm going to put a static method, meaning this method does not have to have an object to act upon. It is a global method that is usable anywhere in main, just by using the name. So I'm going to create the score up. I'm going to pass the two arrays, key and answer, in. And notice I can use the array names right here, answer and key, right in the code in the static method that I've passed them into. And I've got a variable called score that I initialized to 0 to keep track of the person's score. Here I've got a loop. If you want to, you could go from the end to the beginning, or you could go from the beginning to the end. You can start here at 0. And it doesn't matter. I've chosen to drive off of the key array, but in theory we're going to assume they are the same length. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether I'm driving off the key array or the answer array. They're both the same length. And then I'm going to walk the array from the beginning to the end. And in my for loop, I'm just going to have one for loop since the arrays are the same length. And I'm going to compare each one to its corresponding value. So the first letter in the answer key gets compared to the first letter in the actual student answers array. And notice here, instead of using two equal signs, since this is an array of strings, it's just like if I had a string variable. Remember, with strings I do not use two equal signs to test for equality. I use dot equals, that string function. So I can do the same thing with arrays. I could use equals ignore case here to make sure that there wasn't any issue with some of the letters being capital versus lower. And if the two letters are equal, I'm going to bump the score up by 4. This is the same as if I had said score equals score plus 4 here. Same shortcut way to write the same thing. Here I was actually just debugging the code to make sure that I had the right answer. So you don't need that. You can ignore that. And if it's wrong, I'm going to take away a point. Then I send my score back here so I can print it out. Now, one of the tricks to this was also that the person could have left it blank, and if they left it blank, rather than us having to deal with nulls and empty strings, the College Board gives us a little break and says that if the person left the question blank, a question mark appears in the answer array to indicate they did not answer that question. Well, they get 0 points, right? They don't lose a point, but they don't get a point added, of course, if they didn't answer the question. So you might be tempted to say, okay, well, why put plus 0? right? I mean, adding 0, it doesn't change the answer. So why go through the whole rigmarole of putting plus 0? I mean, a question mark is not the correct answer, right? But our logic, the way we have it here, would take a point off when they had a question mark. So we do kind of have to go through the painful process of adding a 0, even though we don't necessarily have an answer that's correct, right? We have to go through this futile exercise of adding a 0 because the College Board has set it up that way for us to do. So what we actually have to do here is sort of enhance our if statement. So if they're equal, we're going to add 4. If they're not equal, and actually we have to be really careful here, right? Maybe a better way to do this, because I don't want to count anything wrong, maybe I could say else if the answer has a question mark in it, right? I can either do nothing, or here, because the College Board has asked me to, I can really just add 0. Otherwise, it must be an incorrect answer. So, I believe I should still get a 6 for my answer here, and I do, so everything is good. So don't ignore that last requirement for the question mark in there, but you have to be really careful how you set the if statement up. Otherwise, you might end up taking a point off for that question mark instead of just giving them no points at all.